to Wednesday Night Sessions. Many of you are repeat viewers. If you've never watched one of our shows before, welcome to Wednesday Night Sessions. We have a very cool special event here tonight. Normally, if you've seen our former episodes, you're aware that it's usually just one guest. And tonight we've got three guests joining me. I am your host, Mitch Nobis. And we are coming to you from Farmington, Michigan. We are sponsored by Kickstart Farmington, our local arts organization. So thank you and shout out to Kickstart and particularly Director Dwayne Hayes, who puts up with my nonsense as we get this show out every couple of months. So tonight we have Lee Potts, Lannie Stabile, and Karthik Sethuraman joining us. Like normal, I'm going to let them introduce themselves here in a minute. And then they're each going to give us a reading. So we're going to follow the usual Wednesday Night Sessions format. 10, 15 minutes, somewhere in that window, reading from each of our poets tonight, followed by some discussion. All right. So I'll just kind of call you out to introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into the reading. So Lannie, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a poet. I just recently started dabbling in some fiction as well. 2021 is my year of Flash, as I like to think about it. I'm a back-to-back semi-finalist for the Button Chapbook contest and a back-to-back finalist for the Glass Poetry Chapbook contest. Unfortunately, not back-to-back this year. I did get knocked out for both of those. And I am one of the managing editors for Barron magazine. And I live down the street from you, so I'm in New Michigan.
Lee, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Lee Potts. I'm also a poet. I stopped writing for about 25 years or so, almost 30, and came back to it just back in 2017 and found out things really had changed a lot. But for the better in a lot of ways. I'm also on the staff of Barron Magazine. I'm poetry editor along with Lannie at Barron Magazine. And I just had my first chapbook come out, and I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later. Came out last spring, so that was kind of exciting.
Cool, thank you. And Karthik.
Hi all, nice to meet you. I'm Karthik. I live in California, so I'm calling from the Pacific Coast today. And I'm secretly monitoring the Giants and Dodgers game.
I'm sorry for the timing.
It's okay. I'm also a poet, just like Lannie and Lee. One of my chapbooks came out earlier this year, Prayer Under Eyelids, but we'll talk more about that later. And today I'll be reading from a much longer collection of full length that I've been, sending out to a couple of places and so on that Prayer Under Eyelids has evolved into. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. And viewers, you probably picked up on the theme. We have three writers who had publications come out last year during the pandemic, or this year during the pandemic. Over the pandemic, time means nothing anymore, right? And Karthik also gave you a little behind the scenes here that we were recording this as San Fran and the Dodgers play a very important baseball game. So sorry to those of you in the room here missing that game. All right, Lannie, you are up first for the reading. So would you please take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. So as everyone mentioned their book that came out during the pandemic, but I didn't, I will introduce it now. So good morning to everyone except men who named their dog Zeus. Came out in June of this year. And it is my first full-length poetry book. Very excited about it. It kind of meshes two things that are important to me, which is Greek mythology, love Greek mythology, and sexual assault, which is something that I am a survivor of. And also, just as a little addition, hating on Zeus, which is a favorite pastime of mine because Zeus sucks. Figured I would start reading from this, perhaps read some new poetry, and then maybe a small flash piece if I've got time. So the first poem in this collection is Leda, and I do like to lead off with this because I think it sets the tone really well. If you've ever seen swans fuck, you'd know it's a folded napkin in a dither, while a second lays flat, soiled, praying for dinner to end. The male tops the female in a freshwater body. She must float them both. She is submerged, beak beneath the ripples, lost to the jaw around her noose-length neck. The deed lasts 8 seconds. After he glides to the edge of the pond, distancing himself from her, while she honks, reaching back, trying also to rid herself of him. Zeus appeared to Leda as a swan, then raped her. When I first started thinking about writing about my rape, I didn't know how, and I like literally tried a bunch of different like just kind of ideas to write it out, and I couldn't. So then I decided I would just write about how I couldn't write about it. I couldn't talk about it. And that really seemed to open the floodgate. So this is literally the very first poem I'd ever written about it, and is called I Can't Talk About It. My gut, that vengeful city of insomniacs, swaps tales of trauma with a loose twilight. Terrified of optimistic things like the sun, it drowns my sealed lips in caffeine. I survive on muddy irrigation and anxiety, hollowed and hungry, nibbling on fingertips that stretch for perfect words, and refuse to let anyone within spitting distance of this soft underbelly. My tongue, that talented freight train, has been known to tap out the rhythm to anything goes, but when anything went, everything went, and I am going anywhere and nowhere. Are you following? I can't talk about it. It's like a scream that keeps getting caught in my throat, but the scream is a pair of men's hands and his cufflinks snag at my vocal cords. Just like his fingers snagged my closed eyes, dragging me from a peace I will never have again. My mouth, that deceitful poet, spoke forgiveness, but how can I forgive my skin collapsing in on itself? My bones drop away even as I stand here, and the only thing I can do to stay together is to shove myself into pockets of an oversized sense of loss because I swallowed his apology and his 3 paintings of a single taupe flower, as if jeering at the femininity he stripped from me, as if he knew this was the 5th time my body has been deadened in this way. My womanhood, that lost and weakened wheel squeaks even as I weep to keep things moving along. Every day I'm misrepresenting myself. Am I the apple, the serpent, or the whole damn rib cage, protecting a man who refused to protect me? For years, I've been howling on the inside, raking my soul red and raw with the need to tear this story out of my body. And I still can't talk about it. So the last poem in this book that I'm going to read tonight is My Mother Deftly Misses the Point. And my mom, she really liked to help people. And so there was like a consistent stream of men and women in our house that she was helping like get on their feet. And this kind of talks about how she took a priority to that over my safety, and my brother's safety. My mother definitely misses the point. I tell her, Billy stares at me. Billy of the ponytail, of the chatter, of the unpaid rent. Billy, the virtual stranger, whom I beg my mother not to invite to Thanksgiving. He may have a lazy eye, she theorizes. Billy of the eyes I know are blue and alert, because of how often I find them across the room and on my ass. I tell her I won't come to dinner if Billy is there. She ignores the ultimatum and asks, "Are you sure you don't mean Tim?" So that is the last poem I'll read in this book. I did want to read something new. And I'm going to read this poem that I wrote pretty recently, and it placed 9th in the Super Poetry Highway contest, which is yearly, and was partly judged by Taylor Bias, which I'm really excited about. So it was her and I think 2 other judges, arguing the etymology of okay with someone who's always been fine. I tell her it started when I was 6 years old. The fear of spark, the fear of smoke, the fear of burning down with the house. I am the walls containing a kitchen fire, soup on the stove, mom forgetting to turn off the burner, the ham bone crisping, the navy beans shriveling, a girl crawling on an empty belly, pressing her hand against every door, searching for safety, waiting to be engulfed. She says, I've experienced trauma, that my amygdala still thinks I'm 6 and trapped and inhaling darkness. I tell her, Ronald McDonald came to my elementary school and taught me how to fight fires. And when I say fight, I mean run away. When I told my mother Ronald singed a Bible just to show how flammable everything truly can be, she did not believe me. My mother never believed me where men were concerned. She says, I must be misremembering that part about the Bible. I tell her, I have never been safe. Before the house fire, before my amygdala developed, before Carl and James and Chris and Brian and Benny and Michael and David and Paul and Ron and Abdul and Merle and Andrew and Timmy and Billy and all the other men who scorched everything I've ever held faith in. How can I be when even this conversation is Tinder? She says, we've made good progress and she will see me next week. I tell her her clothes smell like smoke. And I think I'll finish with one of my flash pieces. This is actually only, I think, like 300 words, under 300 words. It is called Ink Blot Jog. 1. This running app promised a transformation from depressed woman sitting on the couch rewatching cold case files to, oh my God, don't mess with me, that fit bitch, in just 6 weeks. On Monday, I ran 5 minutes. Wednesday, it pushed me to 8. Today, this app is expecting me to run 20 godforsaken minutes straight. And I just can't understand the math, unless the math is trying to kill me. 2, but there are worse predators out there than arithmetic, so I pick up the pace. 5, sweat is dripping down between my shoulder blades, pooling in the small of my back like the pressure of a warm, insistent hand. And in the mirror, I notice my oversized muscle T now resembles a Rorschach test. 8, my feet slap against the treadmill's conveyor belt. My legs pump hard and steady, and the podcast I'm listening to tells me I am a strong, mindful woman who can overcome anything. But that mind starts to wander to an inky night, to an empty city scene, to a street lamp illuminating an approaching figure. 10, Mr. Rorschach, I see a shadow increasing in size. 12, my calves are on fire, as are my lungs. but I breathe deep and rhythmic like my therapist told me to. 15. Stay focused. Stay aware. You've got this, the voice encourages. 17. My body is wet and hot and excruciating. I want to stop desperately, but I need to outrun this. 18. Mr. Rorschach, I see an attractive woman running for her life. 19. The voice validates me. I believe in you. 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 20. When the app dings and cheers, I am still running. I am always running. Thank you so much, Mitch, for having me tonight. I'm so excited to be here with Lee and Karthik, and I can't wait to hear them read.
That was stunning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your reading. I know to the repeat viewers, I say this every time, but I turn off my screen while the guest is reading and mute myself, and it feels so inauthentic, because if we're all in a coffee house or a bar or something together right now for this reading, we'd all be like gasping, at the same point there. So I know it feels awkward to read to the blank screen, but please know that there was plenty of gasping in the right spot. So it was very powerful stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could go on, but I started by myself, just let the readers read. So we will do some for the audience. I think I might have said this at the top, but there will be some conversation afterwards among the readers. So hang in there. Some of these topics may come back up. Next up, we were going to go Lee next on my screen, which will probably be the screen for the viewers, I'm guessing, will be Lee Potts. So Lee, take it away. You're next.
Thank you, Mitchell, and thank you for bringing us all together. This is already unbelievable. I've been lucky enough to hear Lannie read a number of times now, and I've heard a couple of those poems a number of times now, and they just don't lose their power at all on repeated hearings. They're just amazing. I'm going to start off with some poems from my chapbook that just came out in last spring, called "And Drought Will Follow," and it's about the book's dedicated to my father, and he was in the final years of his life after I found out that I was going to have a chapbook come out, and he was suffering from dementia, and he did know that I had a book come out. I did have a chance to let him know that. I ended up dedicating it to him, and it sort of the events that we were all going through as a family at that time, in a lot of ways informed the book as it came together. It's not entirely about that, but a lot of the things that came up in his life, and you'll see this from the opening poem, which is about him, get repeated over and over in different ways in the poem, some having to do with him, a lot not having to do with him, but a lot of the themes are in this opening poem. So I'll just get to the opening poem. It's called Crows, Crave, and Gather. Father abandoned his patch of ground, barren as a kiln's brick floor. Might as well plant rows of rust chips in coal dust, he said. He followed stars that said water north and finally settled like silt where the rivers widen and slow. He planted an apple tree by our home and willows along the water. Graveyards always occupy land that no farmer desires. The departed are sown in the shadows of tombstones that tilt and dissolve as the rains erase words their dead never saw. Storms hide the stars all summer, and lightning reaches down, bores into the ground, and fuses soil, leaving behind brittle stone roots, glazed as smooth as porcelain, and just as unlikely to grow. As it rains, crows crave and gather rage back to their branches. They each watch with one eye as I tend to a garden my father will never see. Standing water. 1. Like a practiced baptism that sent our souls nowhere, we leaned back into the blue wall town pool, hands open to hot summer sky. We learned to still ourselves, to allow our bodies' hollow chambers to lift us again above the weight of water, and our breath, unsealed, returned our voices to us. 2. The pool remembers briefly everything that touched it, written in nothing more than its motion, each ripple, each trough. 3. Now the pool rests beneath a field filled in like any grave and largely forgotten. There's nothing here for the moon to pull out anymore. But night rain recalls pausing with the water once gathered here, and whispers a complaint to weeds and rocks on its way into deep, slow aquifers and eons in the dark. This poem's called Hard, Stubborn Things. Knowing all about easing soil aside, but wanting only water, tree roots tend towards rivers, tip right past what must seem like just more stone. All those hard, stubborn things that they couldn't carry, keep, or protect. Shards, buckles, rusted blades, plates, cups, combs, coins, once deeply desired, once needed, once held as tightly as a child's hand, running through streets of dark, dead houses just before an army arrives along with the rain. Then discarded, lost, buried, forgotten fruits of violent seasons, finally found and teased back into night, into air and light with shovels and a series of increasingly tender tools. This poem is a little bit more, is sort of autobiographical in a way. It's kind of an imagined present or an imagined future if I had taken a slightly different route in life. Very early on when I was in high school and then in the beginning of college, I was very interested in photography and worked for a while as an assistant wedding photographer. And somewhere along the line, I discovered poetry and writing poetry, and photography became more an interest and a hobby more than a possible profession. But sometimes you end up thinking about what things might be like if you had sort of continued in another path. This is called Getting Light. I often find the lens a burden, fixing wedding days to stiff strips of plastic and chemistry that can grasp all a moment's light. The walk, the ring, the kiss, the dance, the sliding garter, the departure, each photo almost instantly melancholy, always showing more of what has vanished since the shutter snapped aside and allowed the film just enough light, but no more. I can't trust in my stale eye now, and I am slow to focus these scenes. Turning the lens out and back, trying to find how far, but never quite sure I got the light to where it needs to be. And just one more from the book. This is called The Finding of Names. We continue to watch his landmark shift to an empire he can no longer cross into. A garden far beyond the tree-lined dusk there harbors all of creation he can no longer name. Family photos now seem to him like penny postcards sent by strangers, wordless, arriving without address, depicting foreign places, the injuries time inflicts, and room after room of people he does not know. All right, I'd like to switch gears a little bit here. I'm going to start with actually one of the first poems that I had published when I came back to writing a few years ago. This is called House Warming. Despite blessed salt thrown to the corners of each room and all the best wishes, I drop a plate and am first to break a piece of our place settings. Doing dishes, I dry what you wash, and watching the knives, I leave enough weight out over the counter's edge to tilt the whole thing down into air, leaving no hope to catch. Rim first, it collapsed, then shattered into a legion of edges now beyond any other use, except maybe a sky in some mosaic, all sharpness cemented away, or maybe as a wretched little prize, perfect for a passing magpie. The final sliver won't be caught up by broom bristles and dustpan, and is almost too small to be found by sight. Only your skin will do, or mine, with unexpected pain and the slightest of blood sacrifices. This poem is called A Concise History of the Wind. Our sheets caught each gust that passed away through all day. Then our hands held them stretched above and across our bed. The top sheet corner folded over on one side, creased page in a book of words left over at day's end. Countless threads crossed above and beneath us, the same blue as oceans you'd find on an antique atlas showing the ends of the earth. And we finally sleep as the still, quiet eye of a horizon-wide storm slides above the deep. And I'm just going to do two more. This one is much more recent than the last two. This recently appeared. This was the most recent issue of Tramp Set, called We'll Miss the Stars of the Morning. Exhausted, but I'm finally on a flight and empty for now of all departures. I wonder what everyone crossing this continent with me tonight wants above all else. What will you want when I arrive? Every light down there is where it is because someone felt the stab of desire. How do any of us navigate to what's always hidden behind the infinitely tender horizon, our course set by constellations of our own want? We traced white lines like thread taut between some of the most distant stars and devised creatures we alone can see or name. Always and forever on the same journey that first hauled us to our feet before we even had all the words for what we were after. And I'm just going to do one more. This one is very, very new. I've been working on it since the spring, but I literally just finished it about a week ago, maybe a little less than that. I don't know quite what to make of it. It's one of those poems I don't know what quite is going on. But this is its debut. It's called Nights Went By Like Nothing. As it descended that night, it seemed to be more and more made of silver and flat. Empty branches divided the sky into shards and edges, and the moon might have been the god of broken glass. But our eyes were full of the fire we made. Its embers rose like crumbs of us that eddy unseen behind our souls. And then, later, It was as dark as that room you're never going into, even if you unlatched the door. A dark that took our words before they even reached our throats, and we slept quiet and rough as salt at the bottom of a bowl. Thank you again very much, Mitch and Lannie, and I'm looking forward to hearing Karthik's work.
Thank you, Lee. That was outstanding. That line about the moon that's going to stick with me. Like I might dream about that tonight. The god of broken glass. Like that's a killer line.
Thank you.
All right. Again, I'm going to just kind of pass the mic and keep the act moving. So Karthik, you are up next. Take it away.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful to have gone after two wonderful readings, and also a little bit nervous. But today I'll be reading a bunch of new poems that are part of my longer manuscript in some stage of completeness, submission, editing, revision, etc. But earlier this year, in February, I did have my chapbook come out, Prayer Under Eyelids, which is available from Nomadic Press. And a lot of the poems in this collection began in 2016, 2017. And then I think this collection, I was working on it through 2020 when it was accepted for publication. And a lot of the poems in this longer book, some of them were present in Prayer Under Eyelids, and some of them were written in 2019 and 2020 and 2021. So I'll talk a little bit about that. A thread that really goes through all of this work, and I don't know if you can hear it on Zoom, but my son is screaming outside. My wife and I welcomed our first child in 2020, May of 2020. So right after the pandemic began. So a lot of these poems were kind of written around that time. So yeah, I'll stop bantering and begin reading. So the first poem is called Genealogy. Genealogy. Substitute a voice with a bell. The machine of the world rolls on. A father can't keep tune. His throat is sometimes a throat and sometimes an edge to look over. Does that pass on the restraint to walk into and not away? And the thing, isn't it also like itself? The body, eureka, eureka. The child stirring in bed, startling from reflex, but also a startle. Shush him to sleep or hum, but would I give him my voice? A song? Who gave me mine? And I want to share one of the epigraphs that I put in this manuscript because I think it's reflective of some of the things that I've been thinking about. It's from Srila Ray's Winter Poems for Gawain. We are the only two other dark things in the room, and what I tell you now is not in your book of alphabets or kind green monsters. I'm going to read another poem also titled Genealogy. Genealogy. A poem is a family generating machine. It turns a tree into a mother. She houses a boy sleeping in summer. A mother alone on the creek's edge. From a distance, someone she can't make out yells for him. A mother alone in starlight. A poem bringing her nighttime. Soon autumn and her empty branches. A poem looking for a house. A mother for a turn. A house for all the things she will relinquish. A turn to revisit her relations. Morning revisiting sunlight, mother revisiting seasons, and then the creek full with snowmelt carries away her shedding. The next poem I'll read, which is very close in sequence to these two poems I've just read, is called Departure. From below, we saw two scarecrows, mistook them for men. But did it matter the cold falling light, or their cracked arms, or only that they swayed? And if that alone was enough, what else had we overlooked for movement, or in its absence? We climbed when the stairs were stationary, didn't we? Grabbing our belongings, puffing, and the conductor's whistle, the pigeon crashing into the screen, and our mothers asking us to stop squirming. It's squirming, and was this thing still, or even in the abstract past living? We made ourselves a bed of straw, stirred awake each morning, and by nighttime built a fiction for the next sunrise and how we'd reach it. Motionless, but for clawing through the dark and through the darkness, shifting bit by bit. The next poem I'll read is also from the beginning of this manuscript, and these poems are kind of sequenced very similarly. And it's called Calamine. In school, I imagined adulthood as nighttime, a jacket draped over the chair, a street lamp peering through blinds rattled loose by fingers, a need for water. Age is finding myself in bed with socks and no shirt, holding the necklace my sister gave me, naming each of its seeds. A single breeze squeezes through the netting, and everything that is alone. One summer, a magician blew out the candles on my cake, decorated the picnic table with cards, and I prayed for all sorts of things. Being run over by a tandem bicycle, losing my mother's ring at sea, but most of all, sitting on a wooden bench, hands under my legs, waiting for the last trick, and the ants crawling onto my left foot. The quick tincture of zinc and iron. That night, I couldn't weep. I stared through the crossbars, scratched at my pregnant foot, and what would I become by sunrise, if not full with the sight of some future self, a hint of the postures he occupies in sleep. And then I want to end with reading one more poem, which is also very close in the sequence in this manuscript I'm reading from. And it's called Velocities at Dusk. It begins with an epigraph from Michael Ondaatje's Velocities on the Island. To slow an animal, you break its foot with a stone. Metaphor can only pull as far as the rope tied around my waist, dangling, a lure I try to coil into a weapon, my body draped like a fern in the brush against the glint of something docile I promise not to harm, to excuse that which doesn't ail me, my length like a bang in the stillness, the fletches bounding into a snake, and how long can I cook its stew over a flame before it spoils or spills over into an experience I haven't had of draining a wound and finding my father's necklace like I left it, covered in the shade of the wilderness and warming in the steps of something searching for him, or at least for what he has and where he took it from. With me in the foreground, tending a lamp and the vapor of illness seeping into me or from me, I can no longer separate a thing from its shadow. Like the flock ashore and the trailing spray, the boy, so certain of who he might become, he swears last time was just a mistake for what he hadn't eaten and how he'd kept himself that way, he says. As if pointing to a place I must have forgotten. And close, on the other side of the beach, where a solitary gull, breaking the tide, labors, waits for a moment, and disappears. Thank you. I just want to thank you again, Mitch, for having all of us. I think this has been such a wonderful opportunity to share all of our work. And yeah, excited to hear the rest of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Karthik, for your reading. That was also outstanding. I always, when I tell my friends about this show I get to host, I always say it's kind of like I have a front row seat to like these secret readings because nobody else gets to see this. Like we pre-record it, so it's so cool to hear this now and know that other people, like in 2 weeks or a month or whenever, get to enjoy it as well. I love having the preview, I guess, short version. And I know this wasn't really the point of the poem, but 2 or 3 poems ago, you had the line "adulthood as nighttime," and I just had to laugh because, like, literally as you were reading that, my 7-year-old has gotten up out of bed and came downstairs searching for me. So, you know, I purposely record these things at night on the premise that I can get away with it, but now, no, that the children will find you no matter when and where you are. Lannie and Lee, if you could rejoin the crowd here, we'll get the conversation going. There we go. Rejoin. I mean, turn on your cameras. You know what I mean. So I want to come full circle back. I am going to throw one question out there, and then feel free to ask each other questions. We do not need to treat me as some kind of formal host here. I think in the planning message, I said let's think of this more as a chatty podcast and less as 60 minutes where I'm interviewing you with a gotcha interview or something like that. So you all have had a publication come out during the pandemic, which is my understanding is particularly a challenging time to have a book come out because folks can't just waltz into bookstores very easily. We now have supply chain issues left and right. Again, we've kind of had them a couple of times. The pandemic has gone on so long. But at the same time, like you've put together these marvelous pieces of work, and there's a great amount of joy in getting that out into the world. So it's kind of a preamble to just a question. Just kind of tell us about your book's journey, getting from all the process work of here are these ideas, I'm putting it together. How do you choose which poems go into the piece, et cetera, on all the way out through like it came out during a pandemic, and how are you dealing with that? So I'll just throw the question out there. Whoever wants to jump in first, just tell us about your book's journey, especially coming out when it did.
I guess I can answer first. So my book, I think, has a special journey just because it started off as a micro chap, just about poems that talk about Zeus and his conquests. And I think it was like, actually, no, I'm sorry. It started off as one poem, and it was like a section poem about how much Zeus sucks. And then I turned it into a micro chap. And then I was like, well, I've got a little bit more to write. So I started writing personal pieces and added those, and it became a chapbook, which I sent along to Cephalo Press. And they were like, hey, we really like this stuff, but we only do fulls. Can you write more? And then I did. So it ended up being a full manuscript, and Cephalo published it, and it came out in June. As far as being published during the pandemic, I don't have a basis because not really. I think that having virtual readings has been beneficial, and I really like them because I can jump on one, and then if I happen to double book, I can jump on another, or like I don't have to drive an hour to a place to be in person. So I really appreciate how we've been able to do virtual meetings like this, because I wouldn't be able to travel really as much. So I think that has helped really. But again, I don't have much of a basis for a full length. So.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this question. And yeah, I had to go off briefly because my son is, knocking on the door. He's a year and a half and he can't. Well, he's learning a lot of new words now. So, he was like, he knows the word for door. So, he was outside the door, slamming the door, saying door, 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 door. But yeah, it's his dinner time. So, but anyway, I think a lot of what Lannie said resonates with me a lot, especially being a new parent. Being virtual has really opened the ability to attend so many more readings across, all of the United States and really all of the world. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think it's kind of weird because, in my opinion, chapbooks were always kind of a very personal thing. And sort of distribution through bookshops and stuff is always like extremely personally driven. And I know like Lannie has a thread on Twitter where she talks about all the work that she's done to get her book into bookshops, which I find extremely inspirational. So, I think it's just a long way short of saying that I think in some ways the pandemic has helped and, and in other ways definitely made a lot of things way more complicated. I think it took my book, it was supposed to come out in 2020 spring, and then it ended up coming out in like 2021 spring, right? Just because of like all the changes, coordination. So yeah, I mean, it just has been something that I've definitely had to adjust to.
Lannie is definitely the hardest working poet in the business. I think the biggest disappointment for me with the restrictions that we fell under because of the pandemic was that my book was published by Frosted Fire Press, which is associated with the Cheltenham Poetry Festival in the UK. And if it had been a normal year, I actually would have had a chance to go to the UK and read at the festival. That was part of the prize to get a chance to do that. And apparently, there would have probably been some significant in-person sales at that reading. So not only did I miss out on sort of that big chunk of people already associated with the press and that group of poets there, but I missed out on a trip to one of my favorite places to go in the world. So it was kind of doubly disappointing for me. But as Karthik and Lannie said, there is the advantage that you do get a chance to do a lot more readings with a lot less friction. It's just so much easier to get on and do readings like this than having to get on planes or travel or arrange the physical space and all of just the logistics that come with having to do it in a physical space. But the downside of that, I think, is that it's a little harder to sell that way. I think it's easier for people to maybe not buy a book, based on a remote reading than a physical reading. So, yeah, I think my experiences were very much in common with what they experienced, but it's unfortunately all of us have really been hit with that. So.
Yeah, you just reminded me, Lee, that when I won the outright contest in 2020, that I was like, winners are supposed to read in Washington, D.C. And I didn't. And I completely forgot until you said that. And I was like, oh, that's right. I was really disappointed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We had a whole family vacation that we were thinking about doing. And I love London. I've been to London for work a couple of times. And I wanted to do a couple of days in London and just, what can you do?
Yeah.
But yeah, DC, I could have come down and I probably could have seen you read. Oh, I did my first in-person reading since the pandemic, actually last weekend. It was, there's a local poetry group called the Mad Poet Society, and they have a festival every year. And I'm sorry, it was the weekend before last. And they had 45 poets They had 5 sets of about 10 poets each. It was really a very exciting day. It was a lot of poetry, but it was so exciting to be in a room. You know, we all had the masks on and everything was, you know, the way things are now. But just to be back in a room with that many poets and with that much poetry going on, and the conversation about poetry during the breaks, it was amazing. And it really is something I had forgotten, I think, how much we all missed that. I mean, virtual is fantastic, and we get to go to a lot of things that and hear people we wouldn't otherwise get a chance to. But just just what happens when you're actually there in person like that, you know, it was so amazing.
I would like to think going forward we could have a world with both. You know, that's sort of the new dream, right? Like we've
Right.
learned that there's a lot of good in the virtual too. So ideally we'll find a happy medium that combines them or picks and chooses which are live, which are virtual. But yeah, I would echo everything you said. It's been, well, I mean, I haven't been to a live one yet, but I mean, there's definitely an element that's missing with the virtual, but I've seen people read from California, you know, and Oregon, Washington State. You know, I would never be able to travel to go to a poetry reading. I mean, I got, like we said earlier, I got a 7 and 11-year-old upstairs. I can't even get down the street for a poetry reading, let alone to Washington. So in that sense, it's been fantastic.
Just earlier today, I was at the readings on the Pike. So I've been to a reading tonight before we did our reading tonight. So, I mean, how would you possibly do that in the other world?
Oh yeah, I had plans to jump into an open mic at 7, but I had a bit of a migraine, so I ended up missing it. But yeah, like you can be able to do that.
Thanks for
I mean, I will say it's been like fantastic to be here with the door barricaded, and then, you know, now I'm gonna run, but I've just had such a great time reading with everyone. And I think that is something I'm grateful for in this whole process. But, you know, I also wish like I could have celebrated my book in person. But we'll see. I mean, I know you guys have great writing, and hopefully we'll all get to publish our next books in person and enjoy that part of the journey.
Hope so.
Yeah, and the material you read from the forthcoming manuscript was outstanding. So, you know, we're all rooting to see that out there pretty soon in person.
Are you actively subbing it, or did someone pick that up? So, sorry.
No one has picked it up. I've only been submitting it since like August. So, or you know, like the summer. So we'll see. But yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Glad you could make it.
Yeah. And thank you for having us, Mitch. Look forward to when this is out and sharing with the world.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Bye, everybody.
See you, Karthik. All right. Should we? So 3 of us could stick around for another minute because we didn't get the traditional Wednesday night session silly question in yet. So I feel bad.
Hey, I've been practicing my ice cream answer.
I did ask. This wasn't going to be the official silly question, but I asked for people that don't know me in the real world, I'm a teacher, and I asked my students, if you could only have one dessert for the rest of your life, what would you have? And I mean, it was like one of the most fun questions I've ever asked, just like a silly discussion question, because some kids are just like instantly go with like their gut instinct favorite thing, and then others would get very like analytical and clinical about it, like, well, pie comes in a lot of varieties. Like they try to get like that. I'm going to answer a category. Like if I just say cookies, I could still have chocolate chip, but also oatmeal raisin. Like it was. So sometimes the stupid questions are the most. They're deep. They're deeper than you would think. Let's put it that way. So yeah, let's do it. Stick with it. Do the ice cream. What's the favorite ice cream then, Lannie?
I don't really like it. That's why I was like, I gotta come with something. I remember I invited a group of poets that I admired together to kind of just like meet one another and chat. And Maddie Corley was in that group, and she was like, well, let's have an icebreaker. What is everyone's favorite potato? And I was like, I don't really like, or favorite French fry, that's what it was. And I was like, I don't like French fries, but and then everybody made fun of me, and everybody like bonded over that. But I don't love ice cream. I do, however, like Neapolitan, but I mix it until it's like soft serve. And yeah, I don't like eat them separately. They always have to be mixed. That's my answer.
That's a fun answer.
Just if I could step back a second before I commit to an ice cream. About the idea of having one dessert the rest of your life. I worked at a fairly fancy restaurant when I was in college, and sometimes we would work in the dessert room, and all night long you had a big tub on ice of white chocolate mousse sitting in front of you, because it was one of the most popular desserts. They put it in like an almond pastry cup on strawberry puree, and it was just unbelievably good. With you know, it had chunks of white chocolate in it, and I was sitting there all night, and all night long you're going like this, you know. So it was like, when I first started, it was like a dream. You're like, oh, I love white chocolate mousse, this is great. And then probably 6 months later, just the smell of it, I started having to leave the lid on it, because the smell of it, and I mean, even to this day, it's 30 years, to this day, the smell of white chocolate makes me not quite as bad as it did back then, but just I'm horrified by white chocolate now. So
It's really sweet smelling too.
it's really sweet smelling too, and it's you know, so any answer to that question, you're doomed, because that means you never get dessert again, because sooner or later you'll get so sick of what you picked, you can't eat anything else, you know, you can't eat it anymore, right? So anyway, that's my little deep thought about favorite dessert. And I would say hands down, my favorite ice cream is chocolate peanut butter. No question. You know, the more real peanut butter that you can get in there, the better. So that's just, there's something about the you know, that classic combination of tastes, and the salty and the sweet, and then just the different textures, the different ways they feel in your mouth. Just, I don't think there's any better ice cream than that. So
that is, I always debate between it's a tie for me, and that's one of them. So here, chocolate peanut butter combo. I always like, my kids will make fun of me because like 3/4 of the time, like I go for some kind of chocolate peanut butter thing, but then that other fourth, I get like, you know, I need some kind of fruit thing, like a strawberry cheesecake, or you know, I went to school in Ann Arbor, and they used to have Stoochies, and they had this great, they'd vary the fruit, but it was always a cheesecake. So it'd be like blueberry cheesecake, raspberry cheesecake. I wake up having, you know, sweaty from dreams over Stoochie's old cheesecake. Ice creams, they're no longer there. People out from Michigan, Stoochies is now something different. They don't make their own ice cream, but they bring in other people's, maybe something like that. Yeah. So
I was going to ask, what Stooges is that like a chain, or is it a?
Stoochies was just shout out to my Ann Arbor viewers out here. I think there were 2 storefronts. It was Ann Arbor only, maybe, and then they might have spread to a couple of other spots. But it was an Ann Arbor ice cream place. Like, they made their own. Had a couple of spots around campus, and you know, it was fantastic. I mean, you know, everything from your formative years you remember fondly, right? Like, you know, I'm in Ann Arbor from like ages 18 to 20, whatever, 22. So it's like whatever ice cream I had at that point in time was going to be the best ice cream of my life, regardless. Right? That's that's kind of how college works.
I just keep thinking about the little ice cream shop that's in Hell, Michigan. Have you ever been there?
I've been to Hell, but I have not had the ice cream. No.
Well, what's there to visit? There's like a post office and then the ice cream shop. Like,
driving through, and I came
doing in there.
Driving through, and I came out the wrong way from the mountain biking trails and the Potawatomi Trail over there. It's
like, welcome to Hell, and you're like, oh crap.
No, gotta get out of Hell. Just kept driving.
I think you can say the same thing about music, though. Like, in your formative years, the music that you grew up on is what you're going to go back to. Like, you can enjoy new music, but it's just never going to be as good as, you know, for me, it'd be like late 90s, early 2000s music.
It's one way I know that I'm wired different because I'm an old man and I still like love seeking out new music. And it's one of the things, like, you know, the pandemic traumatized everybody, right, in some way or another. And I reached a point like 6 to 8 months ago where I realized, like, you know, I need something to comfort. So I purposely went back to the music of like the early 90s when I was in college. And the only thing I've run to since is Sugar, Bob Mould's post Husker Du band. Like I've only been running since July to Sugar albums. Forgive me if people don't know Bob Mould or Sugar, but like and it worked in that sense. Like here's this one thing that meant the world to me when I was, you know, 20 years old. And so like I don't normally just listen to the old stuff over and over again, but I have this year and loved it. So I don't know. We're way off of poetry now. My apologies, but
no, that was the point.
I mean, the silly question has led us from ice cream to white chocolate mousse to music. Like that's the point of the silly question. I guess I should come up with a name. It needs a theme song. Like, you know, silly question time. All right. Lannie and Lee, you've been outstanding. And remind me, we need to email Karthik and get his answer so we can at least like tweet it out or something when this episode goes live. We need an ice cream answer from Karthik. This episode won't be complete without it. Lee and Lannie, thank you very much for joining us. Karthik had to dart already. Thank you to Karthik as well. Any last comments or words for the crowd before we bid everyone adieu?
We've been talking a little bit about marketing, and I realized that I never mentioned my book. You can get at andrewwillfollow.com if anybody's interested. So,
All right. Well, I'll take your lead then. And good morning to everyone except men who name their dog Zeus can be found at cephalopress.com, Amazon, but you do have to be in the like little books area. Otherwise it comes up with like automotive things, which is really weird. And then several bookstores across the United States, which I often tweet about. So.
But Lannie hustles hard, and we'll when this episode goes live, you know, we'll tweet it and all that stuff. I'll try to remember to put links to the books. On Twitter tends to be where more people find us. Out there is a Facebook page through Kickstart Farmington, so we'll put the links there too. I never remember to put them on YouTube. I'll try to remember to put them in the YouTube comments as well, so that it is easy for the audience to track down these books. All right, Lee, Lannie, and Karthik in absentia, thank you very much for taking the time to read for us tonight. It has been a true pleasure and just a joy to get, you know, like a room. You know, we were talking about live versus virtual, but it's been a joy to get a room of poets together for the night. You definitely made my week, so thank you for that and everything else.
Thank you.
I always love talking to you, Mitch.
Yep, thank you.
Well, and one of these days that pediatric vaccine is going to hit and I can like re-enter the actual world. Let's hope, fingers crossed.
Yeah, Lee, I keep inviting Mitch to have a beer with me. He's like, not yet, but soonish.
Long story short, we're waiting for the pediatric vaccine. We have a reason.
It's understandable.
What?
I hear there's still a world out there. I you know, feel like I'm living in a bunker. I record these in the basement office. I'm like literally in a bunker right now. Anyways, thank you very much for taking time. Audience, thank you for joining us. Regular episodes of Wednesday night sessions are forthcoming soon as well. Keep an eye on the Twitter feed. Keep an eye on the Kickstart Farmington Facebook feed. And I don't know, like just the crows will probably fly by and tell you about it. The world has its ways of getting the word out there. So thank you all. Peace out. We'll see you next time.
Good night.